Welcome to Forever Exile, the Path of Exile podcast. I'm Justin, A.K. Tags.
Tyler, Record of Days.
And I'm Brittleknee.
Welcome to episode 121. We got BK back. We're back to our hopefully every 10 episodes versus last time because of, I don't know, was it floods? I think it was floods that we had to delay.
On the relative things, like natural disasters, a pretty good excuse for fudging the schedule a little bit, you know?
It's a reasonable excuse. Yep.
Yes.
But we're back. 121. This is like my most excited number since 21. I like 21.
Yeah, I was about to say, that's your tag.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yep, that too. But yeah, I don't I forget that it's in there. That's right. Anyway, episode 121. Thanks for joining us, BK.
Thanks for having me again. Always a pleasure.
Quick shout out, new Patreon this week, new to. Thank you so much for joining the Patreon, supporting the podcast. If you're curious what Patreon is, you can find out information down below. Gets you access to After Dark, which is our podcast after the podcast, where we talk about more stuff and things. We love you.
We do. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Justin had a funny comment just before we get going on the show here. Justin had a funny comment while he's going through and listening to the reveal. You know, like Justin and I are always messaging each other and stuff like that. And so obviously during the reveal, we have a couple messages going back and forth. And to give you kind of a hint as to what Justin thinks about the overall reveal of 3.17, what did you say? It's kind
so
of
this came from a comment. This actually came from a conversation with me and BK where I was mentioning the fact that I was worried about my time for actually watching the release, reading the manifesto, reading the patch notes, and real life. And so we were talking about the fact that I was going to pre-record myself, just saying something like totally or I agree. And I'll just drop it in when editing. So if you hear me just randomly go like totally. That was pre-recorded.
Yep, that's right. But it's funny because it's kind of like, this is like Christmas to so many of us, but it's like, you know, but we get it 4 times a year, but it's like a week or a little bit longer every time. So it's almost like we get Hanukkah 4 times a year. This is exciting, eh? I love how
we're referring to a new league stuff, right?
Yeah.
Well, the new in-game too is like extra sugar on top.
Yeah,
totally.
I'm really excited about it. I think most of this episode, totally. That's right.
There's Justin. He's actually in the bathroom right now, and later on, he's totally.
You should do the Crush. This episode.
Crush from what's his name? Crush the turtle from Finding Nemo.
From Nemo.
That's the clip you should use. Totally
righteous. So most of this episode is going to be around everything that's happening because we haven't. Our last episode, I want to say it was right before the manifesto came out, right?
Yeah.
I think it was after. Yeah, they had just done the Archnemesis teaser trailer thing, and so we hadn't talked about the manifesto. We didn't talk obviously about any of the stuff that just happened yesterday for the league announcement, and then the patch notes, which came out right away. Did they do that last league? Where the patch notes came out right after?
Last week was the first time that happened. So there's no guarantee it was going to happen again today.
Yeah, but now they've set a precedent. It's got to happen every single league.
It's nice.
I definitely,
like it. As a content creator, it's really nice too, because before we would have it would come out the Wednesday before, and sometimes patch notes can very drastically change your builds. And if you are someone who has multiple builds published, that just turns what should be like the time that you're resting and kind of relaxing and doing some meal prep or whatever your sort of like pre-league rituals are, you're just cramming all these updates in there, especially if you aren't, you know, a creator that's been able to expand into certain editing teams or have people that help you or anything like that. Like it gets just massive crunch. And so to have it basically this early where I can kind of leisurely go through things on the weekend and prepare resources, it's just so much nicer. Not that they do that with us in mind, but it's nice.
Yeah. Well, I thought of you right away when I saw the bow upgrades, of course, right? Not just a lot of the modifiers that can go onto the bows and the two-handed weapons, but then also the quivers, and then even just the base type improvement for all of the bows. You've been talking about how some of your bow builds have been kicked to crap recently, and your previous excitement over the fake bow improvement league that happened 4 or 5 weeks ago. It's kind of more
fake bow improvement.
Well, we'll see. So it's sometimes it's a package deal, right?
I'm still not happy.
We'll see. but I thought of you right away, and like last league, like you said, would be a very good example as to how thankful a content creator could be for early patch notes, right? Like last league, it was defenses, which is for every build, and mana reservation multipliers, which every single build can. Any build can redo itself to take advantage of those things. Whereas this league, little bit different, but there's definitely a huge amount. I mean, spells and bows are a big part of the massive part of the content. So yeah, I like it early as well. I agree with you for sure. As a content creator, I actually can spend time with my family after patch notes now. Before League launch, it's nice.
So do we want to jump right into announcement and our thoughts just like right off the bat? First off, I'm so happy they still do this. We've talked about this, I feel like every single League launch. These are my favorite ways to announce a League. I really like that they do this pre-recorded video that's epic and awesome, and then he follows it up with the live Q&A.
Yeah, I think this format really works too, because what they did right this time that they kind of didn't do before was like this time we had that sort of old school trickle of items and teasing and all that other kind of stuff right into the announcement, with them, of course, dropping the bomb the day before of Kirak map mods, and everyone's like, Xana, what happened to Xana? Oh my God.
Yeah.
And so like you were like compelled to tune in to figure out what happened. So like I think this cycle specifically is perfect. We have that nice kind of drip feed of stuff to kind of build up the excitement, and then we have that really nice production. I'm sure a lot of resources and everything go into getting that prepared. And it's just this like kind of like onslaught of information followed by the Q&A, which is nice because people can sort of kind of get some of those initial questions solved about like, okay, that's cool, but like, how does this work? Or did you think of this? And we get our answers right away. And then bam, patch notes. It's just such a good cycle. If this stays, this is really, really nice.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree.
And especially now that like this is the first time I guess we've experienced this as fans and content creators for like the end game change. You know what I mean? We've had this kind of reveal for a few leagues now, but now just this system that's a little bit more perfected. It's such a nice relief when you get that extra information dump because it's an end game change as well. So it's yeah, I'm definitely thankful for it. I really, really like it. I feel bad. Like I feel kind of bad for wraeclast. I love their episodes and I watch all of their interview episodes when they have GGG on. But I like that this is like an hour and a half. Like I can't really handle a lot more than that. So when they would have a GGG employee on after the fact, which they did kind of at the beginning of these Twitch presentations, I just didn't have the time for it. And I would end up watching that interview maybe a week later. So even though I absolutely love the wraeclast inclusion with a lot of stuff, it is nice that I know I'm not missing something if I dedicate an hour and a half of my time on these league launch days. So I think
was it regular that wraeclast was followed up the Q&A with
talking
to somebody?
2 releases with them doing it.
Like after the Q&A, is that how they did it? So
Yeah.
they'd go, wow, that is a lot. Yeah.
Well, it was a different GGG employee, but still, for someone who's just watching and just wanting to absorb all the information, I didn't feel like I was missing it. So, yeah, it was nice. Like, I love the Rory stuff. I love hearing the people that are behind the scenes and working all the time, and when you have Mark on there. But anyway. Yeah, no, I like the setup. I think it's awesome. And I love wraeclast. Crickets? Crickets? Do you want to just get right into Siege of the Atlas? BK,
I guess so. There's really no reason in doing like the how was your week stuff.
I'm making so many fucking gross sounds in the microphone too because I have like this thing in the back of my throat. So like enjoy that later. Because all these pauses, what you're not hearing is me being like.
I'll probably take them out.
No.
Justin's probably is never, ever a yes.
No, for BK's audio, it'll come out. Tyler's
suffer.
We'll see.
You're going to hear my suffering.
I want people to know what I have to deal with every single week.
You got to stay tuned to the end of episodes for that kind of stuff.
I'm just getting over a bit of a cold, so I apologize.
No.
Oh, nice. We're all sick. We've all been sick. That's awesome.
Hooray.
We're good. Thank you, Ty.
Well, one thing that I love, like right off the bat.
At least he moved. I didn't move my face, so enjoy.
So, Siege of the Atlas. That's kind of a big deal. I mean,
that is.
How many amazing changes came with core content right off the bat? That was insane.
So you want to jump right into Atlas stuff then? Let's do that.
Well,
switch to new Atlas.
I went in order. Right. My notes are in order, but I'm fine to jump around. Do whatever you want.
Justin and I are just like, imagine having notes.
What are these things? I finished scrolling through the patch notes right before I popped onto Discord. So I will say when I watched the video though, the new Atlas, best part of the whole video, besides the audio and the music, obviously, but the new Atlas, I love the new Atlas. I don't know how it's going to play because obviously we don't know, but Jesus, the idea of just like start at the bottom, work your way up. Don't need to worry about quadrants and which ones you're doing. And
regions.
I just love it. I really like it.
They definitely learned from the previous iterations of the Atlas and what works and what doesn't. And I think Chris summed it up on the Q&A afterwards, saying that this was like basically them learning lessons in game design, that like simplicity and approachability matter, but that doesn't have to come at the sacrifice of depth. So we have like the depth involved, and that's more in relation to kind of like getting through the content and getting the void stones, but then also like specializing your tree. So you have like agency and the ability to have specialization, with that creating layers of depth as it interacts with different systems. But like you can look at the Atlas now and just understand inherently what to do. Not like, okay, go to each of the 4 corners and get your first watchstone, and then make sure that you socket these watchstones in this region, and then you have to piggyback each one over here. So this one only is done with 1 watchstone, this one is done with 2, et cetera, et cetera. Like the old systems were just complex for the sake of being complex to create like basically a barrier of putting a player from getting to maps to the end game.
Well, they weren't intuitive. I don't think the old Atlas was like, I've been talking to a buddy of ours who just picked PoE up again. Pretty exciting that he's going to start playing. This Atlas, I feel like, at least at first glance, is relatively simple to understand if you're just getting into it.
Yep.
You don't have to, like you just talked about, going to the outer corner. I mean, this is back when it was 8, but going to the outer corners, getting your watchstones, planning to get back into the middle, like that. It wasn't, you didn't just know that. You had to either
you had to look it up or have someone tell you.
Figure it exactly. Yeah. So I really like how simple this looks.
And another thing to think about, we basically went from 32 watchstones to the simplicity of this new voidstone system. Like, yeah, we did go to 4, but we were at 4 watchstones for 1 league? Or, 16 for 1 league? Like, it's really going from the complexity of the 32 watchstone system down to these 4 voidstones. And I
need them too. Voids, what's nice about it is that players are no longer punished by not being able to reach pinnacle encounters.
Yep.
So, like, if you're a brand new player and you don't kill the pinnacle boss in your first league, you're still not being punished for it. Like, you can still get 2 tier 16 maps. They will be on the Atlas inherently. The only thing that you gain by then doing voidstones is a more diverse series of maps that are at the higher tier level, resulting in then eventually all of them being tier 16 capable. And this is something that we haven't ever seen before, which is really nice. Like way back, we had the Elder Orb, and the Elder Orb got introduced, and you could make any map a tier 16 map. It wasn't just like you had the 4 Guardians, and then those were your only tier 16s, but then all of a sudden you could run a 16 of whatever, and you're like, wow, cool. And then like we had this other iteration where everything was pushed up to 14 to 16. But this is the first time we've had a tier 16 capable Atlas before. So that's pretty darn cool, considering that can then turn around and be engaged with the new favorite system and then the new Atlas passives. Like the amount of agency you have over what your end game looks like right now is amazing.
And I love how many times they reference, this is related, but I love how many times they referenced the like puzzle or matchmaking in the video and then the interview, like the jokes about how they've heard that people don't like, Maven's puzzle and stuff like that. Because
it's crap.
Well, it is, but I'm not trying to bring up that and like distract ourselves. And it is. And but I love the humility of this. Like, they create Cyrus. A lot of people hated Cyrus. Whether there were people that did, they were fine moving it to secondary content. You know what I mean? They were fine restructuring everything. And I'm excited to see these new bosses and where they went with it based on popular criticisms of these 2 major bosses. But now you have to beat Uber Elder. So not Shaper, not Elder, but Uber Elder. Maven, the Searing, there's one of those words that one person at GGG knows, Exarch, and the Eater of Worlds. You have to beat those 4 to get the different void stones. And I don't know. I like that I still have access to a legitimate Atlas, even if I don't beat one of them. To me, like, accessibility was what I heard screaming in the back of my head this entire reveal and interview. I thought it was really awesome.
I have a question because I didn't read it or see it or hear it or whatever. What was you put 4 void stones in, you're going to have a full tier 16 Atlas, which is amazing. What's the process of 1, 2, and 3? Do you know what that changes?
So it's just going to gradually add more levels to everything. I don't know if that's like all maps plus 6, and then the next one's all maps plus 4 more on that.
Okay, so they didn't say specifically
gradually raise the tier, right? So each one will raise more of the atlas up level wise until eventually all of them. But I don't know those steps for each one. If it's like 4 levels to everything, or maybe the first one is 4 levels and then the other ones after that are 2 or something. I don't know. We don't know the actual breakdown of it.
You're not getting them till very, very end game. So I was wondering if it meant that as you socket 1, some become, you get a few more tier 16s, and as you socket 2,
yeah,
like I wasn't
that's
sure
exactly
what
how it goes.
Okay, cool.
Because eventually, like the 14s, even if it's like +2 or something like that, like those 14s are now 16s that were base.
Right.
So like it.
What just happened?
I don't know if what you're going to edit or not edit.
Nothing.
Well, see, I live in a cul-de-sac, and there's a few other cul-de-sacs around, and so backyards touch backyards, and I know that sounds really dirty. I don't know if backyard means something to someone else, but there's a lot of cats in the area. So when we have those kind of exploratory cats that have balls and they're willing to go to the far ends of the earth to discover what it is that they need to do, we get a lot on our deck, and my pets do not like other animal visitors.
So TLDR, a cat came into your backyard.
Yep. And the pets saw it.
Cool.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about, but
I don't
am
either.
excited.
It's just so damn funny.
Less
It's like
I
there's
do
a
like
parade of animals and they're all mad.
It just went nuts.
We'll get back into it. Less is more. That's like this whole new end game. It's so accessible. I mean, you can pick your influence. Oh, sorry, I'm going to screw that up all the time because now it's not influence, is it? It's horror, right? Like the 2 new Eldritch things, they're called horrors, not influences. Influences are still Shaper, Elder, and then the 4 Conquerors, right? Yeah, the other 8 were Guardians, and they didn't have influences. Okay, yeah, no, so there's still a 6 influences, and I'm going to screw it up a ton in this podcast. I'm going to call them influences.
We'll point it out, don't worry.
Okay, good.
That's what we're here for.
But you can, love it, but you can now choose your own progress all the time, which is like, I mean, after you've encountered, but I love that he said encountered. I don't have to beat the boss to start benefiting from that. I just have to encounter the boss. And then I can start getting these new horror mods or possibilities and items on my gear, which is amazing. And I mean, just the fact that it's one thing, the no regions is great. When you're going like to the Atlas tree, oh my goodness, I can't tell you how exciting it was to upgrade the old Atlas, but then be disappointed because I didn't realize I hadn't been in that region for however many maps. You know what I mean? Because I'm excited to do this map or that map, or I got this type of, conquer drop. And it's nice that this new Atlas tree does every single map. I think that is so cool. And it definitely changes the strategy too, because you're okay,
you jumped right into the craziness of an Atlas tree.
Yeah, that's part of the thing. What was that like?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be in half an hour?
That's insane.
It's huge.
That's insane.
It is so
It's
crazy.
nuts.
117 Atlas points. I mean, maybe I'll only get 90. I don't know how it all works, but man.
I think it was more than that. I think it was 117 is what you would get from completing the maps, and then there were 16, I want to say he said, or something. There was some number that you would get from completing some of the more difficult content.
Yeah, the total number of nodes is 600.
Right, but I think you get like 130 something if you complete everything.
Right.
But that tree is,
Massive.
I think that's so cool. Yeah, so fun. I can't tell. Are they mastery nodes? Like there's little weird things in the middle of each of them.
We don't know yet. So the fact that there's like a picture there is very like normal. Even before the mastery system was introduced, there was always like a little picture of like an axe or something on an axe wheel. But
they were lighting up though.
They didn't have the sort of like button graphic that we see with the masteries. Like when you're in game, there's sort of like that buttonish sort of graphic-y whatever detail to the ones that are actually passive. But in screenshots that you can see on the main page right now, you can see ones that at least have a notable allocated. There's a blue ring around it. So we don't know if that's just acknowledging like, hey, you have that, or if it's maybe an inherent extra bonus, or if it's a full mastery.
So exciting.
I don't know if it'll be something where like maybe if you have a certain number of those rings lit up by then further allocating into like a certain type of system that you're trying to augment. So for example, we'll say breach. We don't know if it's going to be like a breach mastery per one and it's just like the passive tree, or maybe like for each breach mastery ring that's lit up, there's some sort of passive bonus that happens like to the number of breaches that can show up in a map. Like we just don't know right now. And it could be anything really. Or it could just be a pretty ring that lights up and it's like, yo, dog, this is breach. And you're like, cool.
Which is fine too. That's cool. I just love that you have now something that, okay, so there are a couple things, and we've talked about this in past episodes. One of my biggest gripes with stuff with regards to Maven was that unless you played a lot and played for a long time, a lot of the stuff you didn't get to juice your Atlas in past leagues because you had to have so many things witnessed, so many fights done, and so especially when you get into whatever that thing was called with the last
Uncharted Realms.
That was the one. For somebody like myself, I got into it a few times, but it required so much playing, so much, you had to have builds that were capable of doing it. Now you have this Atlas tree that is accessible to every single person. It's accessible and points given right off the bat, and it affects everything. I don't have to worry about it. They took a lot of the stuff that I remember us talking about in past episodes and really answered a lot of those concerns, which was it's now accessible for everybody. Yes, there's of course extra points you can gain from doing the like really high end stuff, which is fine. But you're talking, I want to say he said it was like, I don't remember the exact number, but it was between like 12 and 16 additional points. That's out of 100 and whatever, that's fine.
Right.
I am really excited to see an Atlas tree that affects the entire Atlas that is accessible from the start of maps, and everybody can do it. I think that's awesome.
This comes as a answer to both like player agency that was requested and sort of initially dabbled on in the form of having like craftable watchstones and those passive things where you could choose to specialize in certain things. But it indeed created the issue of like the end game starts at the end of the end game, where you can't really utilize and benefit or maximize on any of these really cool systems until you go and do all of them. And doing all of them was just not possible for a lot of like more casual players. And that cut them off and obviously created feelings of like, well, that sucks that it's not for me. And this solves that problem in rather a really eloquent and beautiful way. And it also solves a promise that they made during the podcast last, whatever, when they did the whole series of contest or podcasts and went around and talked to everyone. One of the promises made during those events was that they were going to remove the juice. So like high investment mapping was something that they were going to try and curb down and have most of that reincorporated into the base Atlas experience. So that you could still have like sextants and scarabs and chiseling and all this other kind of stuff, but it wouldn't be as mandatory to then utilize certain systems. And they've done it. And they've done it in a way that I didn't even think about it. Like when it clicked all of a sudden, it was like probably the second time I watched the announcement, I'm like, oh my God, they actually got rid of juice. Well, not got rid of it, but like the fact that as you're completing, like anyone who completes their tier 1 through 5s has so much access through the Atlas passive points now to then further utilize stuff. Like even if you progress slow, you can take all of those points that you're going to get from just doing your white maps and specialize into a certain type of reward, whether it's like breach or legion or like whatever it is that you want to turn around and then sell or farm and actually do something, even if you like progression wise or map wise, like maybe your character isn't strong enough, but if you have to take a pit stop and farm, like that ability to do that for you is there almost immediately. And you don't have to be like, okay, well then I guess I'll just go sit and heist for like a day since I can't afford my upgrade. Like you can still do like certain things aren't the answer anymore and there's more choice.
Yeah. And it benefits every skill level of player. If you can only get map bonuses for 50 maps, you still have a lot of fun doing upgrades and going along and doing things. If you can get all the nodes you can, but there's such a nice benefit for every type of player. It's really, really cool. They even, Chris emphasized, he was asked later on in the interview, but he emphasized that co-op, they're constantly now thinking of co-op, which is neat. And he said that he can't think of any issues with this new core system, that it should be extremely co-op friendly, which is nice.
Yep.
Yeah, and the Archnemesis one too. It looks, I think the co-op side of it looks really fun. I have a question about the Atlas, the new Atlas passive, because again, I probably wasn't just paying attention, but does it start from the bottom and you work your way up, or were there certain starting points? Or
so the Atlas, there's going to be the initial like maps that are tier 1, right? So you'll still have like you start from the bottom and there'll be those 4, but then those 4 or 6 or whatever it is will branch out into tier 2s, that will branch out into tier 3s, and so on and like fill it up from the bottom up.
But the Atlas passive tree though.
They start at 1. They start at tier 1. So as soon as
do you start on the tree? Is it a progression of working from the bottom to the top of the tree, or does it start in the middle? Or?
I have no idea.
Yeah, they didn't specifically show.
I'll click around while we talk, but
yeah, I couldn't tell. The thing they showed you like different points being allocated in the video, which looked great, but I was kind of curious. Is it something where you start from the middle and work your way out? Because if it was working from, I was just thinking out loud, if it starts from the bottom to the top, does that mean that the stuff at the top is, maybe some of the more powerful stuff that I'm not sure. I'm just kind of curious. It would be cool if you started more in the middle and could branch out.
It looks like the bottom to the top.
Okay.
Because there's like where you would expect to see like starting areas for like the way the normal passive tree is. I don't see anything that indicates a starting location, like a big graphic. And if you look at the main page for Siege, so pathofexile.com/siege, there's the one background image of like a larger portion of it. And there's no like starting graphic to the left, right, or top. So that I would infer then that it's at the bottom.
Interesting. So I wonder if it is that as you get further up, they're more like, would they be more powerful? I don't know. I'm just, I don't know. It'll be fun to see it once it's actually
I would
out.
imagine some of like the more desired ones, like for example, like the ritual altar, like always having 4 altars, stuff like that would be further up in it because they want you to spend the points to get it, right? Because it's a very, very powerful affix. I mean, the watchstones that you would roll that on used to sell for, I don't know, but lots of X, basically. And then before the Harbinger nerf, like the one with the Harvey one was also very expensive. So like there's some of these that are going to be like very, very high tier and very sought after and very powerful. So I imagine those are probably further north, require more skill points to get to, and then thus have like the sort of, that's the balance of the point investment system too. So this is the first time we've had this iteration of the bosses being 4 versus 5. And I think that's really interesting too, to split up the end game this way, and especially the boss systems, because we've had like the Guardians plus Big Bad 3 times now. So there is the 4 Guardians and then Shaper, and then there's the 4 Elder Guardians and then Elder, and then they smooshed Elder and Shaper together and made Uber Elder. Ooh. And then they had the 4 Conquerors and then Cyrus. And so a lot of us were expecting the same thing. Like, okay, there's going to be 4 little Eldritch blah, 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 especially based off of the
supporter packs.
The supporter packs, right, exactly. And so we were expecting more or less that same sort of setup. But what's so cool about this is that I believe, and this is me completely inferring the difficulty scales of these 4 bosses. What I think is we kind of have bosses that will feel more like bosses, I guess, because there's already an entire pool of, 12 little guardians, right? Now that we have the 3 iterations of the old system, there's plenty of like tier 16 bosses to fight. I'm really hoping that the Black Star and the Hunger, I think, is
Infinite Hunger,
Infinite Hunger are the 2 like lower tier. I want them to be pretty hard, right? I want them to be like lieutenant or like generals, right? And then you fight the biggest bad. So I'm hoping that they are kind of, since there's only one of them per big bad, that they're certainly a more dynamic fight. And more dynamic is, okay, cool. Like, it's exciting to me, right? Because I don't want it to be something that I can just like build up enough damage and shit on. Like, I'm hoping there's some mechanics and everything else in there and more exciting boss fights. And then the fact that there's 2 big bads, I think is really significant, especially given the choice that you can fight either Maven or either of those guys. I think that's really, really significant too, because this is the first time that you kind of have to choose your own endgame. And I know from personal experience, the previous iteration of the Atlas that was Uber Elder focused, I enjoyed that endgame a lot more than I enjoyed the Conquerors of the Atlas. I was not the biggest fan of the Cyrus encounter. While the 4 Conquered fights were thematic and fun, I just didn't enjoy the Pinnacle fight. And I noticed that my enjoyment of the game goes down when I don't enjoy the Pinnacle fight, because it's kind of like, what am I grinding for?
Agreed.
And so what's really cool about them introducing 2 bosses is that, like, one, if you like one fight better than the other, then great. You have one that you can farm. Or say you have multiple characters in a league that utilize different defensive layers, and one is stronger against one than the other. You can just fight the one that is stronger or better for the right type of character. Like, say one might have like lots of degen-y stuff, and so the character that you have that has a lot of inherent recovery does better against that one than maybe the other one that does lots of like super fast hard damage that you need a lot of mitigation for versus the other one. So like it definitely allows people to have a choice when they approach the end game and not just get completely shut out from a boss because of a build that they choose. That's not to say that these bosses won't shut people out, but I'm just saying like there's at least some variance there. So like if you really just hate one and like the other, then you don't have to hate the end game for the 2 years that it's out.
Yeah,
So
no, for
I'm
sure.
excited for like slightly harder mini bosses, and then I'm excited that we actually have a choice in the end game now too.
Yeah, and it's really cool how they intertwined them all, right? Like Maven's still an important part of min-maxing your end game and your character. So it's kind of neat.
I'm so glad they didn't get rid of the Maven invitations, man. Those are some of my favorite things in the world. I love fighting all the beach. And there's going to be a new one. They kind of teased it during the Q&A that there's going to be a new 4-way fight with the Conquerors. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah, super cool. And maybe, I mean, this is just me thinking it wasn't in the patch notes or anything, but there were so many jokes from GGG's side about the puzzle and matching aspect of the Maven fight that who knows, maybe they'll remove it or change it or add some sort of element to replace it.
I wasn't going to say anything about it, but I think that I haven't fought Maven a lot because I'm really fucking terrible at the puzzle game.
Yeah.
Like mechanically speaking, my builds are usually pretty tough for it, but like getting me to remember 6 things in a row is just not.
While dodging and doing other things.
I'm too fucking dumb for it. Okay, I'm just gonna be honest here. I just don't have the brain cells anymore to handle this sort of thing, and it's just been something that I've avoided. Like I do the Maven once for like whatever I need to do, get the passives done, get the items, etc. But then like I just don't do it for the rest of the league.
Yeah.
And this could be me and my inexperience with the actual encounter speaking, but during the live broadcast, they were showing footage of the Maven fight, and she did an ability I'd never seen before.
Oh, right.
There's
right.
like this big channel, like purple explodey thing with like the tracking
big balls thing that went around. Yeah.
So there's the big ball that goes around because that's the brain and a shield.
She had like a bunch of them.
But right, it was that like, giant purple Nova looking thing that then converged on your character. And I don't know if that's like maybe a graphic update to a different ability that she's already done that I don't remember. If that's new, I have no clue. But I didn't think I'd seen that before. And maybe this is, like I said, just me not knowing what the fuck I'm talking about. But
we can't help you there. We haven't fought her. I hate that. The idea of a memory game in Path of Exile is a big nope.
Yep.
Yeah. The way I would have fixed it is just to turn it into an area of denial on the last phase where just like one pie slice goes. Yeah. And then you have the other 2 pie slices. So you have like that sort of pressure, right? Because there's a lot of fucking stuff going on. But like, so like play Simon Says with all of that other stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to ask you guys a question because you probably know this better than I. Again, I apologize because I didn't have time to catch everything I want to know. But I know the whole idea is you get to chase these sub bosses now. So you can pick them as the map modifier and then and then more of them spawn as you go along. It sounds like. What's the process of actually getting to that sub boss?
Just progressing your atlas up the tiers. Starting at tier 14, you have the ability to encounter the sub boss after like certain conditions are met. We don't know what they are, but I'd imagine a certain number of maps.
Yeah, they didn't say what the actual trigger aspect was, but
we are going to be looking at map count series like for progression rather than something that was more fluid like the Elder Influence system. If you guys remember that one from a long time ago, we had like the big puddle of Elder Influence. You had to spread it around, and then once it hit some sort of amount of maps, I think it was like usually like more than 10 but less than 15 or something like that, Red Elder and his guardians would show up and be like, yo, what the fuck? But they did say that it'll be map based, so similar to the progression of getting back to Cyrus. Like it'll be like a map count situation rather than some sort of like conditional. 14. Right.
But bosses can be practiced again. Hey, there's fragments. Bosses can be farmable. They're tradable again. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I heard him say the farmable part, and then I didn't really catch exactly how they were farmable.
Well, they're just re-adding fragment drops again. And they're tradable items. So now you're going back to the point where you can actually practice an end-game boss if you're not earning it well enough, or you just want to do that boss without the progression system. Again, they're going back to the fragment system.
Big
so that's
way
awesome.
Of establishing comfort with a boss, at least for me before, was like buying 20 sets of whatever it is that I was going to do. I think because Shaper was the first boss I learned, and I think it took me 8 sets to learn him. And then Uber Elder took me probably 12 because I was doing it on SRS of all fucking things. Not the build for it. But, you could sit down and buy a whole bunch of it and be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do today. And I'm going to throw my weight behind it and grind my face around it until I get it.
Yeah, I like it. It's good. Can I bring up Archnemesis now?
You go. Yeah, you lead the way, buddy.
Nah, I don't need to. Because the rest is all just going to be core content, right?
Totally.
And it's going to be going back to that. But Archnemesis, I actually only have a couple notes on it, and I like it.
You're talking about just the league
Yeah,
idea,
the
right?
league.
The Archnemesis. Yeah, okay.
It's
Go for
boss
it.
league. It's like 1-on-1 versus a rare.
Yep.
It's kind of metamorphy.
I was about to say, this is very reminiscent of Metamorph, which I believe Metamorph happened alongside a major in-game expansion or change as well. So that's kind of normal, since people are going to be gearing up to fight bosses anyways, having a sort of boss-centric league kind of makes sense.
It seems simple. I like that you're not like, it's just there. Don't leave the area. Don't, I like that. I like that it's just, you encounter them as you go through. I'm a little confused about how you create the new versions, because they said the mods, over half the mods are by combining
right. So
lower ones, but how do you combine them?
As you go through, you'll kill monsters, and monsters will drop like the base one. And then as you go on, you find 2 base ones, you smoosh them together. When you fight the monster that has 2 base ones, it spits out another one that has 2 mods on it. So it's like going up in complexity. So you're taking 2 A pieces and making a B piece. And then eventually, like a couple maps later, maybe you have 2 B pieces and you can smoosh that together and get a C piece. And so there's kind of like this, the recipe system is more of like a combination sort of thing rather than it being like different tiers of like difficulty. Some of the outcomes are only going to be recipe based.
So as you get into the further tiers, though, are you dropping higher tiers of those items? Because Chris alluded to the idea of like, you're going to get to the point where you're not going to want to pick up some of them. But if they're all the building base to the higher base ones, how are you?
So that comment was made specifically in tie to the rewards that are associated with that particular puzzle piece. So if you pick up a puzzle piece, well, I'm just calling it that for now for simplicity speak.
Sure.
So if you pick up a puzzle piece in like a tier 4 map, and like it's going to have tier 4 rewards as far as item level is concerned, so like 70 whatever. Versus, and then if you put that in a monster in an 82 map, like it's not going to matter because like it's still going to drop 74 loot and you don't want that. So like the rewards are tied to the eye level of the monster piece when the monster piece is created. So it's not something to hoard. You want to use it quickly because there's no reason to hold on to stuff that's going to be outdated as you progress the Atlas into higher tiers. Exactly.
Right.
And it's awesome. They're sticking with the dedicated league tab bit, so you don't have to buy, a tab or an extra tab or use your own. I like this. I don't remember when they started it. Of course, it came in with Expedition. It was a league before that where they started doing the dedicated stuff. Was it Harvest? Where they started?
I thought it was Heist.
Maybe.
I think
Either way,
Harvest was the experiment, and Heist was like, yeah, we just do this now.
Yeah. So I like that they're keeping it going. I think that's really nice and thoughtful. I love the dedicated league tab and that they decided to make it a big one, not a small one.
How do you open it? Do you have to go? Do you have to like interact?
I imagine
with
it'll just be the V key or whatever your default is for interacting with a league mechanic.
That would be awesome if that was the case, because I don't want to have to interact with the tower, whatever that thing is, and then hit another button like an Expedition where I had to talk to the NPC and then hit the button to bring it up.
Yeah.
They have a visual recipe system, which seems pretty neat for these mods for the enemies, though. So they'll have like backgrounds or some sort of visual indicator that shows you that this piece that you picked up is actually part of a recipe for something else. I don't know if pieces can be part of multiple recipes and how that would be portrayed, but I think that's really cool. And if PoE's recipe system for their normal core game wasn't so complex, I would love to see that in just the core game for normal items too. I think that'd be absolutely awesome.
It'd be tough to do for the rest of for other recipes.
Yeah, like maybe when they redo their base types. But this could be an experiment
moving forward, that if they introduce other types of inter recipes or something, who knows?
Yeah. But that's all I had to say about Archnemesis. It just looks awesome. I love the boss battle aspect of every single game, and this is just more of that. So, and if it's just like Metamorph, but just a little different, that they'll probably have one of the complaints, and I think it was BK specifically yourself as well, shared this opinion that the end game of Metamorph was kind of weak. And so I doubt they would do that again. You know what I mean? Make that same mistake
I have
twice.
my hopes for what I want to see, but I don't think it'll happen. So like with Metamorph, what was really disappointing to me specifically was that the in-lab monsters hit like kittens comparatively to the ones that were in the maps, because the maps ones are subjected to map mods, essentially, which can drastically alter an encounter, especially when you get to things like monster life and monster resistances if you're playing in like an elemental build and blah, 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 blah. And it just felt like there was this extra layer of stuff missing. Like, so you take the parts from the maps and you go to the lab, and then you're supposed to take the parts from the lab and make like a super creature. And that's what I'm kind of hoping for, more or less, with this one. Like, in a perfect world where this probably totally won't happen, I imagine that the pinnacle recipes, so like say through all of these recipes, there's like 4 things that you can make that are considered like the best and the highest tier of like combinations of stuff. And I would imagine that since it's like you slot 4 of them each time, if you slotted all 4 of them, and the statue would then bust out instead of it being a little monster and then like kick your ass instead. And the statue is like an ultimatum sort of type boss encounter instead.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want. I want the stat, because they put so much emphasis on it, right? So like even in that teaser video, it was like basically drive-by camera stuff of the statue itself, right?
Yeah, that's really
so I want
cool.
the statue to be some sort of like hidden god that's just like, nope, I'm gonna kick your ass now.
Yeah, another Kitava.
Thanks for waking me up.
Yeah.
I like that in this one, it's like Metamorph, it's your own fault if you're getting your ass kicked. Like, you've decided to do that. I like that stuff because it takes away the whininess of it because it's your own fault.
It also rewards people that pay attention to maybe like more subtle things, I guess, in general. Like, so it's very easy in certain MMOs, or MMOs, what the hell am I saying? In action RPGs, especially if you get into like a farming build or something like that, where you're just crushing monsters and you don't think about it. You don't think about like the monster types or what they do. This really brings an emphasis back onto the rare monster being something that is dynamic, in the fact that like you give these crazy mods to this monster that greatly augment its base abilities. And well, when you just mow them over all day, you don't think about it. But like giving those high tier mods to like a Kitava's Herald versus giving them to a squid, like his example that Chris gave, is a wildly different experience, because the squid can only like melee you, but then the Kitava's Herald has a slam, has a projectile ability that has the ability to overlap. Like, there's a lot of dangerous stuff that mob inherently does that's then going to be crazy augmented by these mods. So it kind of like rewards people who have paid attention to things like mob types and mob abilities and this sort of thing too, that like, hey, I'm going to know exactly how to utilize this because I know what mobs don't kick my ass, and have that extra kind of like, yay, I know the game sort of feeling, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And on the subject of mods and mods dropping, there's a ton of new currency in this league too, hey? It seems to be core, right? It's not Archnemesis specific, because those are just the mod ones, but like all the new different types of currency that can drop. Whew.
Isn't it all? It's a lot of it's related to all the new siege stuff, like the Eldritch stuff.
Yep.
All the there is a lot. I read through them, so this is just me. I read through them and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I'm sure some people are gonna love this. I probably won't care.
Why?
But I know some people. It's so craft centric. It's so like, which is cool. I do like that, but I don't know. I like the fact, I guess, that you can start getting it earlier now, so you can play around with crafting a little bit earlier.
What I really love about the system between the implicit modifier altering and then the craftable orbs is that it's creating something that can exist alongside the really powerful mods that we are used to seeing on influence items without adding more fucking influence items to the game. And I know it's convoluted because instead of just adding something with a fancy background, we're getting 8 types of currency items and all this other kind of shit. But it's actually really cool because it allows that sort of like those comparisons to exist between the 2 types of items, but in a way that's more, I guess, interactable for people that are approaching this at a more casual basis. So like, yes, you're only limited to non-influence items with this system, right? Like you can't then add the mods to like the other influences. Like, so you're stuck with normal items here, but you have the ability to add really powerful implicits, and then you have really powerful crafting currency options here too. And the one that's the most powerful is the chaos one. Being able to reroll prefixes and suffixes is huge. Like, say for example, you pick up that belt that has 40 of all 3 elemental resistances on it and like 7 life. you can throw implicits on that and then reroll the prefixes until you hit like T1, T2 life. And that's a fucking amazing belt that you've had. And you didn't have to harvest craft it. You didn't have to go find an 86 shaper base or whatever it is that you're looking for. Like, that's something that a lot of people can approach and do. And it teaches them inherently how to interact with a base item that they can then carry those same lessons forward into harvest crafting or fossil crafting or in interacting with the influence bases. Like, it's that step-by-step hold my hand crafting that people have been asking for. And so a lot of people are like, bah, it's just more orbs and blah, I don't want more currency. But like, if you actually look at the system, this is your crafting tutorial that people have been wanting for a really long time.
The only thing I think with regards to that, though, is the reroll, the prefix and the suffix, though, is going to be specific to, what do they call it? The
tiers, right?
The dominant,
right.
Like which one was dominant, whether it was anyway, I'm just curious if that's going to be well explained with that particular orb. I would expect not, which is fine, but that's just something you have to pay attention to, because if you want to reroll the prefix, you got to make sure that
you are responsible for putting them on. So if the orbs come in like tier 1 through 4, with like the biggest orb being, of course, like the highest version of that modifier.
Yep.
And so you apply that to the item. So you know exactly which one. Like, I have used the tier 4 one on this one, or I have used the tier 3 one on this one. So like, if you are deliberately trying to re-roll a certain thing, you can then put a lower, like, depending on what you want to do, just use a lower orb on it and get like the item base crafted first, and then go through the process of upgrading the tiers or getting like whatever implicits you want instead. So like, there's two different ways to do it. You can either put the implicits on it first, then craft the item, or just put a cheap tier 2 and a cheap tier 1 on an item, craft it, and then go back and put your implicits in later, depending on like how you want to gamble.
Yeah,
they are really cool.
Yeah, it's really neat.
And I believe that's visually indicated too, which one is dominant. I think it turns blue or red comparatively.
Seems like it. Yeah,
I think there's like that actual visual element to it as well. Like, not the implicits themselves will not be colored, but sort of like the other influence items, how they have a certain look to them based on who they're based on. It's red or blue.
I imagine the implicits will show their tier with an alt or something as well, like holding down
they
alt.
do.
I think the only complaint I have, again, not having touched the system at all, is that it replaces implicits. It doesn't add implicits.
In a lot of cases that won't matter, but I get there's some maybe, but
see, here's the thing, and I'll kind of get into this, I guess, when we start talking about the quiver changes, but like, accessories are the types of items in the game where they really don't have replacements. There's going to be like one or two replacements, like what is it, the coral ring, I think it is, that does life, and then eventually it's the vermilion ring. There's one or two replacements, but for the most part, accessories, that base type is the only type of implicit you can get, whether it's, the sapphire ring or whatever it is. Same with amulets, same with belts. They don't really have an improvement when it comes to their implicit. Quivers, for some reason, are considered accessories and are the same way. But when it comes to every other single weapon or armor piece in the game, they have multiple replacements for that, for their implicit, right? And so filters to call the crazy amount of items there are in the game, most filters will focus on the implicits and eventually only show the best base type of each implicit. But now this kind of encourages you to not need to care about the implicits as much, depending on how common this is, of course. But then all of a sudden, it's like, now I'm going to be calling in my filter a ton of items that could roll sweet life or sweet damage or sweet resists that I could flop that on. But because I don't want 1,000 items in the game, I'm still filtering the same stuff based on implicits, but now I'm going to be replacing these implicits. And so I'm missing out on a whole bunch of stuff. I don't. The thing is,
the implicits are only specific, though, right? Like you're not doing quivers.
The item can only be helmet, gloves, boots, and something else too. Anyway, so it's limited on what items it can go on.
Boots, gloves, helmets, and body
armor.
And
then in those spaces, the only competitive implicits that you'll have are the ones from the Atlas bases themselves, which are kind of power in Ritual, right? So Ritual had some special implicit ones, and then there's the Atlas ones. So you have like the minion helmet, or the two-tone boots and stuff like that. And so what we have here is the opportunity to have something, because like before, the Atlas ones offered the implicit, but they were slightly worse than the highest tier of the normal one, usually in terms of defenses were concerned. So like Slink boots would have more evasion because all of the two-tone boots were hybrid bases. Or like if you wanted a lot of armor, you'd have to go with like the Titan gloves or something like that, versus the ones if you wanted the melee implicit, you'd have to go with a lower armor value. So there's like the trade-off was there, but this is the first time that you can take the highest tier defensive option and then give it something really cool as well.
For those items, yes. As for me, like, and you know, you're an SRS fan. I think about the bone helmet and I'm like, oh, probably not going to do that.
I mean, I would rather take nearby enemies have reduced, like, you know, exposure over 20% minion damage. I mean, I can create a jewel that has 20% minion damage on it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's great.
I guess there's ways
you know,
to
like
make
if you find a halfway decent bone helmet or something like that, you're like, yeah, this is great. Like, this is definitely really cool. And especially if you are someone that's using a minion build that has an influenced helmet, you're still going to want an influenced elder bone helmet or whatever it is to make those really crazy helmets. But this is more like on the, again, we're moving back to the sort of like normal crafting bases, normal bases that don't have influence on it. Like I would absolutely take exposure or something similar like that over 20% minion damage any day of the week.
Yeah.
And some of them are going to be more competitive than others. Like, for example, like there's the energy shield. No, wait, shit, that's an amulet that doesn't count. What's another one? So if you do the shield crushy stuff and shield chargy stuff, there's those ritual gloves that have, you know, you do more damage with your offhand and less damage with your main hand, so it boosts the amount of shield damage you do. Like, that one would be kind of hard to beat. But if it was just like, hey, maybe I can add overwhelm physical reduction on gloves instead, like maybe that's better because maybe you have a bunch of flat damage but not a lot of accessibility to overwhelm, or like there's going to be use cases that are really going to allow you to kind of like customize these little pieces of the puzzle that come together to make your build a lot stronger. And those, and combined with mastery and some of these other things, like I think it'll be certainly not insignificant and certainly not overpowered, but I think this is a nice, more linear curve to power. So what's really nice about this is there's a more linear progression system from what the gear you kill Kitava in is until your in-game variation, where you can go from, you know, your shitty rares that you find to, okay, this is a nicer rare because it has more res on it, or this is a higher life roll, to, okay, I got one of these cool little orbs thing, and oh cool, it hit cold dot, and I'm a cold dot build, so I'll use these gloves for like forever, or until I can get my, you know, my specific influence base that has the C dot modifier on it, or like whatever it is that you're looking for. Like, there is actual pieces and parts of the upgrade process that occur more naturally now than it did before, where it was wear what you could until you could get what you needed, but you don't have to wait anymore. And those were, we previously saw this try to be solved in the form of like adding new types of base items, like in Ritual, when we had all those new crazy bases and stuff like that. Like, that was an attempt to kind of fill in the gap between those two things. And I think this new system does it much better. And then it offers you a lot of crafting options in the new currency as well to try and solve some of the problems if it doesn't turn out great right away.
Right. Yeah. And it's again, it's accessibility. Like, you get the base version of these new currency items just by mapping, normal mapping. And you can even get the next tier by doing normal content that an average or a casual player can do. It's only the higher tier content. And I think it's really neat that they're experimenting with the concept in core, not with League, but with core content of your ranges of your mod being tied to the currency item, not to a random roll.
Right. Like, you know exactly what tier of item or implicit you're going to get out of that using that currency item.
Yeah, to me, like, that's a very new way. Ziggy brought that up, of course, but that's a very new way of Path of Exile trying out crafting. And to me, they must be really confident in the base mentality behind it because they're adding it to core. It's not something they're experimenting with in a League first to see how it works. So I think it's really neat. And I love that you can slap it on any item level. Obviously, it changes the item level requirement once you've put whatever mod on it. But I love that there's no restrictions to it besides now I missed this part of the reveal, but you were saying that it's only on like your 4 base armor types, helmet, gloves. Right. Yeah, I totally missed that and I watched it twice.
It's
whatever.
Okay.
You guys are jerks. So
I don't know if they said it, it's just in the notes.
Yeah,
and
I am a jerk for
it?
paying attention. I see
notes.
how it is.
Yeah.
Also, you know what? You were talking about how it changes the when you apply it to a lower level item level, it bumps up the item level.
Yeah.
That made me sad.
I was sad too.
Me
I was
too.
wanting-
Let me create a twink item that's going to help me level up faster.
Exactly. Delve Glows 2.0 is so excited, and in the Q&A, he's like, nope, it bumps up the item level. I was like, son of a bitch.
Well,
You bastard.
what if you get something you actually really like?
I'm just tired of having the argument about the campaign sucks. I don't want to do the campaign.
Hey,
I'm
I
tired
say it, and I
of
say it exactly like that.
You do.
It's true.
That was me impersonating you.
You were impersonating me. I hate it.
Now,
I was
Get
just
through it
like so
faster.
excited. I'm like, okay, cool. We finally have
Justin
like
will finally shut up.
no, not that. Just like
I can't
it's an
wait. I can't
olive
wait.
branch, right? Like we're going to redo the axe, but like here's some cool shit you can make to make it faster. Like I thought it was the olive branch that we've been waiting on for them to kind of like put this alternate leveling system bullshit to rest, where it's like, okay, it's still the campaign. They're gonna do what they want to do, but like here's a tool to do it
Because
faster.
you still had to collect it.
Yeah.
Right.
You still had to go out
through
and
it
get
once.
the item, craft it.
Yeah. I'm with
Oh,
you.
it could have
I'm
been
with
so
you.
good.
I think it should have happened, but you know.
I
No.
turned it off as soon as he said that. That's why I stopped listening.
but here, think of this though,
Fuck this
because
shit, I'm out.
all these cool little interactions that we have now, these new possibilities we have that we'll discover soon. I wonder how rare, and I'm not talking like the type of item, normal magic or rare, but I'm wondering how rare influenced items are going to be now. And I kind of tie that in with Kirik's new missions. Like they've really improved the whole Zana Kirik mission thing, right? I mean, they have scouting reports and surveyor compasses, and you can find deals now within Kirik.
Higher eye level items across the board are going to be more difficult to obtain unless they do some sort of major change, because previously to reliably generate eye level 86 items, you would use the ability to bump up the monster level, usually through watchstones. Sirius used to drop a watchstone that would give you +1 monster level, and you could have like 2 of those, like 'cause there's 2 different kinds of them. And so you would run those types of maps, and that was how you could reliably get those bases. And those watchstones are gone, and they asked about them. They're like, no, we didn't do anything to add anything back. So you're back to using old school methods of generating high item level bases, which is stuff like running Oba's Trove. I think the Olmec Sanctum can do it sometimes too. Delve areas can roll +1 to item levels, or maybe +2, I don't know. And then there's like the Strongbox mod too, that, right, like all items in there have the higher level. So like these are old school strategies that we're going to have to probably rely on. But for influence mods, that's going to be a lot more interesting. Like you're going to have to get high level influence mobs from like the actual boss encounters themselves, because you can't, like the influence mobs are completely separate. So you can't like open a Strongbox with influence mobs in it, because they're counted as separate packs that are tied to a different system than Strongboxes. Unless you get to then maybe specialize in the Atlas points that allow that to happen or something like that. You know, like we don't know, but from the information we know right now, obtaining higher level bases and higher level influence bases is going to be really difficult, comparatively speaking.
Yeah, I mean, those item bases also, we're going to have access to more bosses too, right? Like we're going to be able to get with Kirak, Conqueror, Awakener, Expedition, Ritual, Heist, Ambush, whole bunch of stuff can be found, and there's going to be bosses within that, obviously, especially the Conquerors and Guardians. But he'll be selling a lot more of that apparently, which is nice. And so that obviously, when you beat those bosses and then the enemies within those maps, that bumps it up to 85, maybe 86, depending on your map mods. So there is more opportunity there.
You have to hit tier 14 content plus to get there in the first place. And I don't know. I mean, like, yes, the Conquerors have been retired to like specific map objects that you can then buy or generate through Kirak missions, but I don't expect them to be any more frequent than the Shaper and Elder Guardians were for us currently. And so, like, while I expect, yes, that there should still be access to these things, we're talking about specifics, right? So if you want like this tier 1 type of evasion base with this one specific type of influence that is this specific item level, that's going to be still pretty hard.
Yeah. I'm the kind of player though that I actually like that's an extremely rare thing. Like I'm fine with an item level 84 because that's your tier 1 for all resists, and everything except for my weapon I want to be 84 or higher. I think it's 83 for, what was it, belts and gloves for the max resist? I forget. Anyway, I'm fine with 84 for absolutely everything because I just see that 86 as if it drops, awesome. But the next 86 item I'm going to see isn't going to be even a base type that I want, right? It's probably going to be a glass shank. So I like that there are hard to reach stuff, but then again, I'm not the type of end game player where I'm used to expecting perfection. So
how does Keurig missions refresh?
well, those are the scouting reports that they added. They're these items.
Does that
drop.
refresh it? I know you can re-roll his options.
So he's generated the same way Xana was, where if you complete a map, you can have a chance to get a mission.
Oh, right.
And they
right,
preset respectively because you can't encounter him in a map.
Right. Okay.
For whatever reason, he just doesn't go into the atlas.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things they left with question marks. Like Xana, she just pieces out.
Wow. That's lore stuff. You don't want to spoil anything.
They should have killed her.
She's sad. She's like, boy, I killed Cyrus.
Yeah, she just throws,
throws
her sword down. She's like, I'm out.
That's right. I'm taking my ball and I'm going home. But
she's a quitter.
but another thing that might help a lot more of the casual players is that the daily mission you get from Keurig is now based on the highest tier you've completed within the league. So you don't have to worry about which map you finished on if you were doing a new character. Or
I didn't even know that was how it was before.
That's how it was before. Yeah. Like you could.
No idea.
You always had to finish your session on the highest tier map that you can do.
I had no idea.
And so, otherwise you'd be getting like yellow, what are they called, missions.
I always wondered why they were low sometimes, but I didn't realize that that's what it was based on.
But just that small little detail could help in finding those higher item levels on a regular basis because you're not going to be doing the lower tier maps with him. So it's interesting. I'm curious how relevant Keurig's missions are going to be. And I'm also curious because it is kind of tied in how...
Well, they got better, right? So now you can have like delirious maps and all this other kind of stuff that didn't happen before in his mission pool versus the other ones where it's like, kill shit until you find a card, you're like, great. Or like kill stuff until you find a unique and you're like, oh, cool. This is the 75th curry ward I've gotten. Awesome. Half the time you get the unique and mission completes and you didn't even see it.
Totally.
So like actually having compelling map options to complete is really cool.
They brought up something in the notes that I read about this oil extractor based on like to be able to, which is really cool where you can, I guess, sacrifice, which is really cool for, what are those amulets? Oh my God, I can't even think. What are the ones that Chris loved?
Talismans.
The
you can
talismans.
melt talismans down that have good implicits on them or good.
Yeah, you can get one oil back, which means you could get some rare ones. I'm just curious. It said in there though, based on an atlas tree. I think it was like based on the atlas tree, you could get this. Oh my God, I want to read the actual thing that they said. Introduce the oil extractor, a currency item that destroys an anointed ring, amulet, or map. This item can be attained with a specialization on the atlas passive tree. Okay, so that actually rereading that now makes me slightly sad, which is that it's a currency item. I was really excited at the idea, like if I pick something in the atlas tree, that would unlock some craftable bench that could go in my hideout or something that would let me break that down. Cool. So this is just it's a one-time use.
Right, you find them and it allows you to break the stuff down.
Cool though.
Very.
Not as cool as I thought, but still cool.
For sure, I think it's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Like oil extractor, scouting reports, surveyor compasses, all core. Like these are big.
Because you can have like a really crappy talisman have something like Sovereignty or Whispers of Doom or something that has like multiple golden oils on it or something like that and have a chance of getting it back.
Yep. I think it's really cool. It's a fun thing to add in. I don't know why I didn't read that it was a currency item, but that's still fine.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, though, it says can be obtained with a specialization on the Atlas passive tree. So do you think that just means that it adds it to the drop pool or like what?
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
I'm not sure either. But I imagine that having that makes it so that it can drop, like turning on a specific type of loot on and off or something.
Wouldn't that be weird to all of a sudden have something that once you select it, you've just added something new to the drop pool?
Well,
that's cool.
Those sort of conditionals already exist in the game. We just don't see them very often. A good example of that is if you are farming Angler's Plate, which is that really weird fishing ring, the really, really rare one. Like there's all these like crazy ass conditionals you have to then be even remotely allowed for that item to drop. You have to be wearing certain items, and then the monster that you kill has to be like fleeing because of the fear mechanic and all this other kind of stuff, and then it can drop. So like these conditions, they're like certain things happening in order for things to drop is not new to the game. It's been in there for a while. We just don't see it very often.
Well, whatever you just said, I had no idea even existed.
I got to destroy one, which is the only reason why I know it exists.
BK, blessings never existed before this 3.17, did they?
It's on the boots. March of the Legion boots were the things that would turn auras into temporary. Like you could put auras in there, and then you'd hit a button, which was called blessing, kind of like the way you'd hit focus, I think is how it worked.
Okay.
And it would give you something you would hit. It would turn all of the auras into really short buffs that were more powerful than the base auras. So people were using it to basically, they'd pop all these auras and then just like destroy the shit out of bosses because they'd have all this extra crazy damage.
And that was a
ramping.
unique mod, you were saying, yeah?
Mm-hmm. It was on
All
a
right.
pair of unique boots. And now they've extrapolated that and made it kind of available for everyone, but then limited to one aura.
Yeah.
So before you could put four gems in there and then go wild, but because it was a pair of boots. But now it's one.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. So now they have the divine blessing and the eternal blessing. And that's obviously new to me because I don't really play with uniques. And so it's neat that auras are getting so many more different options now. I mean, I remember way back when how many times is that? There's that one node that makes it so that you can only, they have a keystone where you can only have one aura, but it's crazy strong.
Supreme Ego.
And yeah, and then there's another one where there's, I forget, the one where it's tied to the two 10% life nodes on the southwest of the tree.
Right, those are been changed and gone now.
Yeah, quite a few times. And so anyway, yeah, it's neat now. They have a little bit more aura tricks and stuff to do. And I wonder, excuse me, that was right in the mic.
It's okay, I already did that like 10 times.
Yeah, but Justin keeps mine in, unfortunately. But anyway, I'm curious to see how it is because that was pretty neat. And then they also added mark on hit, which is like hex touch, but for marks. And my goodness, that's really
Doesn't
needed.
require a linked skill, thank God.
Super cool.
It works like custom damage tanking, except just when you hit, like you don't have to hit with something specific like hex touch does. Hex touch wants you to link it to something, and this is just free.
Right. So unless you use like a trigger skill like Vengeance, Hex Touch is a 4-link, whereas Mark on Hit is a 2-link, which is cool.
Yep,
Super cool.
super nice.
Yeah. So that's like the very top of the patch notes. That's like the top 10%.
I don't think anything else mattered.
No,
Right?
that's the most, I mean, it's all exciting, but like that's some crazy cool core content.
All right, let's jump through the rest of them. What do we got, Ty? Come on.
Well, did any of you notice that the duelist didn't say anything Act 6 to 10?
None of the other characters do. They're adding them one by one.
I didn't know
Because
that.
when they introduced the later acts in 3.0, they just didn't get the voice acting into it. So all of the characters fall silent after Act 6
Wait,
and
they
onwards.
straight up just don't say
Yep,
anything?
they don't say anything anymore. Like, 'cause you know, like when you go into like the different area, like so if you're in the witch, you're playing a witch and you go into the very first area, she talks about how she can smell burning bodies. Like that kind of dialogue. Not the like, you know, when duelist kills a bunch of things, he goes like practice makes perfect. Like not that
Right.
stuff, but like the
So like
the
actual stuff.
interactive dialogues. Which is why a lot of us really liked the Delirium content, because we finally had like those little lore tidbits every time you go to a different area. Because like, you know, the Delirium mirror was in every single area. So like as you went across the Delirium mirror, Tangmanzu would like tell
They'd
you
talk.
some mad shit, and then you'd be like, oh cool, and you move to the next area. You can get like a little guided tour.
With the greatest voice ever.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And now they've gone back. I think one of them got it last patch. I think it was Templar, and now they've added duelist.
Oh, cool. I didn't even notice the last one.
Yeah.
They added some other cool stuff too. You can have multiple blight encounters in an area, which is really neat. And of course, the gem and flask affinity options and stash tabs if you want them as well, which I can't wait
The
for.
stash tabs look awful.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm getting them for sure. Now, I don't understand this. They made some changes to specters and desecrate.
I can explain it if you want.
Yeah, Ray Spectre's most recent monster types are now saved to your character and maybe desecrated. I thought that already happened if you had specters.
No, this gets rid of the necessary, so that snapshots it to the jewel, so that if you desecrate, say like before it was by instance area. So like if you were in an instance and then like your specter died and you went back to your hideout and then like you opened another map, your specter that you wanted to use was counted dead in a map that's not even open anymore, and then you have to go get specters again. This instead saves the specter to the gem itself, So you don't have to have a Spectre Bank or anything like that anymore. Like, it always knows what you want it to desecrate based off of what you've raised last.
Oh.
So there's no more like need for Spectre Banks. The other desecrate changes are changing it from a 2 times multiplier in a corpse pool to a stagnant 15% chance to show up. So that is significant in certain encounters, because something like the Shaper encounters, so you know how Shaper has like the different mini bosses that he can have before you fight him, like the ones you go in the 4 quadrants for. Those bosses can change. Each of those bosses is tied to a certain type of base mob type, and then there's 4 of them. So his corpse pool was huge. Like, what types of corpses could show up in a Shaper encounter were very, very varied. The life percentages of those corpses could vary all over the place too. So your damage was super inconsistent and overall lower in something like that. Versus if you were in a synthesis map, which only has synthesis type monsters, there's very specific things that can show up only. That means that you would then do better damage more consistently, because you're going to get your specters more often, because that's what is there. So there's this disparity between the 2 types of damage depending on what areas you were fighting certain bosses in. So this change, as far as the 2 times multiplier to the 15%, does make desecrate damage more consistent.
Yeah.
Or not desecrate damage, but the
exploding corpses.
The way in which your specific Spectre corpses spawn is a little bit more consistent as far as damage is concerned if you were doing something like Detonate Dead. The problem is that they then turned around and took away the huge life multiplier. So we saw them lower them over the last couple of leagues on the certain ones. Like, I think Rusty Crushers went from like 1100 max life percentage all the way down to like 600 or 700 or something like that. But now all of them have been smooshed. So all of the high life specters that we were using to beef up our Detonate Dan damage are now limited at one that is not very good for it. So
they didn't say which ones were being lowered, but they said that they were being lowered to the
Kitiva
Herald.
level. Yeah. It's not very high. It's not very good.
Well, hopefully the ones that I use weren't touched. That's all I care
more than
about.
50% reduction, I think, in terms of most of the high level corpse or high level specters or high monster life level specters that we were using before. It's a significant nerf to damage.
One of the big complaints about minion builds that I come across going through the community is that you really want or need specters to buff your damage. If you're not doing a specter primary build, you're using them and you need them and you want them. And there were enough that if you didn't invest in survivability or life, it didn't matter, they would still survive. So I see the requirement in the investment as a good payoff for, if you want specters, invest in them staying alive. So hopefully that doesn't
translate to Detonate Dead damage. So like if I put Monster Life on that, it doesn't affect my Detonate damage at all, because it's based off of what its base values are. So like me taking a Spectre and linking Minion Life to it doesn't make my damage stronger. So the investment, I understand it from like a support role where like you want to have like gym levels for your Specters to be higher level, so you could have like the 3 of them if you're using support Specters, and then maybe you give them meat shield and make sure the resistances are capped or something like that. Like that, all I understand. But like this was a heavy hand coming down on Detonate Dead specifically, without basically nerfing it for everybody else.
Well, if it doesn't look good on paper, hopefully it makes more sense when people play around with it. Hopefully.
Nah, hit-based Detonate Dead is in a really bad spot, and we thought Ignite was going to survive, but Ignite just got that corpse scaling modification change on top of a 30%, I think, base reduce Ignite damage across the board. So
yeah, 28%, I think, was the number, and then they buffed a whole bunch of spells. Sometimes that doesn't work out initially as they think. For example, last league, they changed how Elemental Overload worked, and they kept, as a skill that I use, so I can use this as a reference, they specifically stated Incinerate didn't get any changes because it's going to benefit greatly from Elemental... Was it Elemental... No, not Elemental Overload. Elemental... What's the other one? Elemental Overload? Oh, Equilibrium. Yeah, so Elemental Overload. Incinerate would benefit well from it, and its damage is pretty mediocre. And then this league, they, of course, buff it a lot, and it doesn't really have a good Ignite. It wasn't part of the, we're buffing this because we reduced Ignite part of the patch. So, Yeah, hopefully anything that they make those changes with. I mean, there's always next league. It does suck when that's like one of your favorite builds, whether it's Corp Detonation or whatever it is. Where
I feel like it dodged a bullet.
down.
I've been lazy as crap, like taking that vacation and then just kind of like taking it easy because it got extended. Old me would have written up the Detonate Dead guide based on what I played last league, but since I was a lazy piece of crap, I didn't write my guide and I didn't waste my time. So it's no skin off my back this time around. I didn't put the guide together to begin with.
Awesome. Well, hey, see, works out. Everybody wins. Everybody wins.
Laziness paid off in this case.
Moral of the story: put your feet up.
Lazy.
Now they made a lot of Atlas changes too, which is awesome. They got rid of waterways but added channel, and I assume that's just for the sake of the boss because they're the exact same layout. Otherwise,
div cards too.
Yeah, so why not?
Yeah.
They have to guarantee at least one map has the tabula card.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, I guess they're changing all that around. I don't know which ones.
And Carcass Jack too, I guess.
Yeah, div cards had a lot of their base maps changed, but they added some maps that were removed that I actually quite like: Channel, Belfry, Square, City Square, and Mesa, or Mesa, however you say it. But they got rid of Racecourse, my favorite map in the world.
We got Frozen Cabins back. Frozen Cabins is boss.
Why do you like that?
It's really, of the new maps, it's really linear. And the boss has got a boat.
Is that the one you have to click on levers to open doors?
Yeah, the boss is a boat, man. I've always wanted to fight a boat. I'll punch a boat in the face. I don't care.
Which one is that?
Frozen Cabins.
Frozen
Cabins?
Cabins?
Comes like out of the water.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's actually a pirate comes out of the boat, but still you get to fight a boat.
Yeah. The boat does come out.
Yeah.
And we can celebrate that Primordial Blocks is gone. One of the worst bosses in the world, in my opinion. Can't see a frickin' thing.
I don't like the map either. It's not, I don't find it a very easy one to clear.
And Val Temple.
Val Temple got a buff. I'm actually excited for it.
It's going to be interesting.
Now it's actually, now it's tempting to play, but it's not, it doesn't seem like it's part of the Atlas progression anymore. It just exists, but you don't need it.
Kind of weird that it's like just a thing.
They did it for the, Brandis Manor before that was deleted, and
Hologram
the other
Masters.
rare maps weren't on there. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see it. Does it become a tier 16? Because you only get it by corrupting a tier 16. Sorry, does it become 17?
No. It'll just say, it's like a beachhead. How beachheads can never be anything but 15s unless they're augmented. The crazy special one, it's the same way. Like it's always a 16.
It'll be fun to do, just not do the boss.
Yeah. It was never the last boss. It was always anyway. I hear you. I hate it. Do you like the new favored system, both of you?
The favorite system seems easier. Did they add?
Those
did
last
they show
8 seconds as a ringtone, please?
Did they say what unlocks each of the favorite slots? I don't think they did, right? They gave like a rough idea, but
a certain amount of progressions and then like certain boss encounters is what I understand, but I could be wrong.
It looked cool.
Yeah, it's way more accurate or way more impactful than the previous favorite system.
Seems more simple too. It's crazy too that you could have the potential to have that many of the same map favorite.
It's gonna be good.
Great.
Pretty
Something
fun.
I would only do.
No race course.
Yeah, I know, right? No race course. But you know what? I'm never going to get all the void stones, so I'm not going to use a favorite system. I would only use the favorite system if I got all 4 of the void stones.
There's no reason not to use it. Yeah, like there's no reason not to use them as you unlock them. You can still get some favorites around of things that you like.
Yeah.
And a nice thing, I guess, this kind of goes back to the regions, or there not being any regions, but sextants now work in the same way as like the Atlas. The Atlas passive tree, it works for every single one of your maps now, which is awesome. It'll be a lot easier to manage.
Yeah.
You won't even think about them until very end game anyway, because it goes on the void stones.
Which is nice that there's still that level of juice for people that play at that level, but it's not so gated.
Mm-hmm.
Such a good change.
Yeah.
Yep, I like it.
Yeah, well, I mean, so many good changes. I mean, Awaken gems now drop from the Maven invitations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is so fun. Like the multi-boss stuff. That's so great. And then same with the Awakening orbs now. They're just part of the general, they're more frequent, and they...
Shut your notifications off, Tyler. Nobody will hear that. They'll just hear this me yelling at you.
but like the Awaken gems, the Awakening orbs, like all part of like this, or the Awakening orbs, I guess, are part of the global drop pool, but Awakening gems seem to be a little bit more accessible now. And just...
Some require you to kill Maven, though.
Yeah. Like the really good ones, like Awaken, GMP, and Xsuch, and all that kind of stuff that will still only come from Maven.
Yeah. But even like...
Or the trade site.
Or the trade site, exactly.
Atlas base types can now just drop anywhere. I mean, sure, they have a lower drop rate now, but I mean, that's awesome. You can do your favorite map. If you kept Racecourse in, I could just do Racecourse and I could get any reward. And I just love all of this. I just think it's awesome. I mean, you know how it's going to make me look so good, but all my simple and prime sextants are going to be converted to awakened sextants. It's going to make me look like a pro. I'm just going to have a ton. It's going to be great.
You're talking in standard?
Yeah, if you guys need any, you just let me know.
Okay. Good to know.
Oh, and for the hideout, Lily's there. We finally have a gem seller in the hideout. It's finally here.
Man. She just invites herself.
Yeah. Which is totally a Lily thing.
The notes were just funny. It's like once you communicate with her, she's just inviting herself to your hideout.
Yep.
It is awesome though to have her in the hideout and all the stuff that she's going to offer. There was a part, I noticed that you put a thing here about div cards when I was reading through the patch notes, because I did very in-depthly.
Yeah. Totally.
There was a part.
Is that a word? In-depthly?
Yeah, I just said it. There was a part where they talked about the div cards. This happened to me a couple times during the patch notes where I clicked the spoiler and was like, nope, not going to read that.
I did that today on stream and
we were reading through it.
I was like, not going to, no.
Yeah, I was like,
I don't care about div cards enough for this.
Whatever.
Like,
I'll see them when I see them. The prophecy part, I was like, nope, not reading that. It's cool that it's there.
Right.
I get it, Tyler. I get it. It's cool that it's
an interesting mechanic when you get rid of it to see how impacting it is, because they're keeping div cards, but they're getting rid of all the faded uniques, or I mean, they're changing all those uniques that would normally be faded. So there's still a lot of changes for people that are into it. There's a lot of div card farmers out there that were specific, and so a lot of locations changed because the Atlas changed. So it's an interesting league to choose to change or get rid of prophecy when you're maybe it's a great league. Maybe they did that intentionally, or they're like, oh crap, we said we're getting rid of prophecy and this is the league we're doing it. But anyway, like it's has a big chain reaction.
The div card system predates prophecy, because you used to turn them into Tasuni, and that was what was so cool about Navali being a thing, was that you didn't have to turn your cards into that shit anymore.
Yep. The prophecy going and them keeping, because I think they said the fawn or whatever it is that you fight in Act 1.
Yeah, he'll still swoop down and try and curb stomp you, but...
Right, is there going to be a cage that's
probably
just empty
not.
there?
He probably just jumps down like the Gorge boss and is just like, yo, what up?
I was hoping the monkey would stay, but...
It would be cool, and you give him a little high five, and then he just like wanders off into the distance. There's like a slow piano solo into a sunset
Never
scene,
see him again.
And then done.
He just slowly walks and multiple times turns and waves to you. And then just keeps walking and then looks back again.
Perfect.
Maybe it'll be GGG's second cutscene. Right? First one's Kitava.
And the other is the monkey slowly going over the distance.
A sad
finally get a second one. That's right.
Monkey's eye. Yeah. But, I mean, Act 2 finally got touched up as well, which is nice. I mean, they talked about it just prioritizing and resources, but it's cool. Now there's going to be a little consistency going from Act 1 to 2.
I think it's cool to see new mobs. That'll be fun.
As someone who oversaw part of like the speedrunning thing, I've been so upset with them because they just went into Act 1, fucked everything up, and like, we don't have time for everything else. They single-handedly like murdered the part of racing I directly oversee, more or less, which is like just the speedrunning side of stuff. And it's like, god damn it.
Yeah, it's
like,
rough.
You basically took a shit and then left.
So, yeah, like, we're good with that. We're fine.
Even flush.
Exactly.
If you can make it through the very first act of the game, you'll be fine.
Now in our private league, I'm screwed. I mean, Act 1, there was breaking the eggs, and then I was probably okay. But now, who knows? If they add row as an Act 2, I'm out.
There's not any.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I like the idea of adding new mobs, and it'll be cool to see them.
Yeah.
But I said this in a previous podcast too. I would be just fine if they didn't mess around with damage. Maybe health, fine, but just let me get through it faster. I'll say it again. I've said it before. Just let's move it along. All right.
Well, hopefully this changes a lot more coming forward. You know how I always die to detonate dead because I can't see it? They're changing in the mausoleum.
Among other things.
Tallman's. You're such a prick. Tallman is the boss in the Mausoleum map, and they've changed how, like, it limited how many corpses you can explode, but also the visual effect for the
like winds up.
Yeah,
now.
something like that.
Which is actually pretty
so
good.
I'm hoping that transitions into the rest of the exploding corpses that happen in the game, because can't see them in some maps, especially if
Sometimes
there's
that doesn't
1,000
matter for
enemies
you.
around. Yeah, but you know what? I'm trying, and shut up.
My favorite thing ever is us doing maps and those dudes that put down the big glowing, and they changed it now, so it's a massive
it's
glowing
super bright,
circle.
yeah, of lightning or
But
fire
running through and things die, and knowing that you're running up behind me because I'll hear a scream every time. Every time.
Watch out! What? Dead.
Yeah.
Portal.
Yep. Portal, please.
Yeah. No. Or it's crazy when you actually see, like, they changed it so that I was dying from those things all the time, and then they made them a lot more visually. You could see them a lot better, and I still die to them. Not as much, but I'm still like, I'll see a whole bunch, and I'm like, yeah, I can grab that chaos orb, and then no, I couldn't. So yeah, but it's pretty good.
With Tolman's thing, one of the problems was if you didn't move much during the fight, you had a ton of corpses right on top of you, and then all of a sudden he'd just go poof.
Yep.
And you either die or take massive amounts of damage. So
There's another boss that has a kind of a similar thing where there's corpses and then an explosion, and I don't really have a lot of time for it, especially because she has the Soul Eater mod to her.
The Illyria.
Yeah,
The Illyria copies. Yeah.
Yeah.
The one that's in the
like one of
bottom
the spider
of.
ones, right?
Yeah, she's in the one map that kind of looks like that one wolf map, and then also the spider forest one.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of those ones.
Yeah, she's a hoe.
It's Illyria, but different.
Yeah.
The one with the cauldron.
Yeah.
And then Burial Chambers too. She's the boss of Burial Chambers.
Yes. Ugh.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And that map's back, I think, this league. Right? Yeah.
Yay.
Are you excited
Yeah, I'm
about
doing that as a white normal map. That's going to be the only map I don't bother getting the bonus
You don't
for.
like Burial Chambers?
I hate that boss. She's annoying.
Burial Chambers is like a fucking bowl of cozy soup and a grilled cheese sandwich to me. I love that
It's
map.
just nice because of how it runs.
Yep.
Yeah, it's linear, it's open.
You guys have stupid preferences. Let's talk
Yep.
about player balance. There were two
we're like
did they say
halfway down your
archetypes
list.
or archetypes? What's the way?
Archetypes.
Archetypes.
Did you guys just say the same thing?
Yes.
There's no ch.
Well,
Don't say the
yeah,
ch.
I know. Yeah, when does CH ever say ch? Yeah, that makes sense to me. All right, so spell, handcast, self-cast, spell builds, and hit-focused bows. BK, you're not happy? I was expecting you to be happy, but then you said you weren't happy.
It's a step in the right direction for sure. So we'll leave spells for a second and just focus on bows. And I talked about this in the recent video that I made too. But so what they've done is they've essentially increased the base damage of certain bows. And then they've also made the flat elemental rolls that we can get on our bows, like equivalent to the two-handers, which are pretty chunky rolls. We're talking about anywhere between, like, let's say 70 to 100 as a guesstimation, flat damage from what T1 used to be to what T1 is now. And that's significant. And so are some of the other changes, new quivers, and the sort of homogenization of certain bow mods in general. Like, there's no elemental damage to attacks, there's just damage with bows. So that's good for elemental, fizz, or other types of damage, or like the dot ones too that are based off of a initial hit, sort of like poisons and blah, blah, blah. So it's good for all of that other kind of stuff. But the reason why I'm still not 100% satisfied with this is the fact that there's still only there's very few builds that can just go all the way through the content without extremely significant amounts of investment. So if you want to play a bow build that farms Simulacrum, for example, all the way up to wave 30, you're going to spend a fuckload of money. Sorry, you're going to spend a buttload of money.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's okay. There's always these comments like, BK has a filthy mouth. And I'm like, every single time
We're rated explicit.
I literally give myself the pep talk, don't swear. I mentally bap myself with a newspaper before I come in here. And then it's like F-bomb central anyways.
That's awesome. Yeah.
It's explicitly rated purposefully.
Say what you want when
Because
you
of
want.
me. Thank you.
Not just your episodes, no.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's just you.
It's like, we gotta up our rating now. She's on again.
Yeah.
But so they solved the problem with bows being something that required incredible investment to then utilize by doing these changes. And what they've essentially done is allowed more people to farm in general at the tier 16 level, or like the higher tier. Like getting a bow build into red maps is easier, but getting a bow build to boss is still very difficult.
And you think
that's
the
where I have
changes
the
to
problem.
the base
I
bow
really
damage is
want-
bad for that?
No, it's not bad for it. It's just not enough.
You don't
That's
think
why I'm
so, eh?
upset. No, it's not
okay.
enough. Like certain bow builds might be able to approach bossing, and then you have like your power horses, which are going to be like Toxic Rain and Elemental Hit, and there's some other ones that can still boss and boss reliably. And Caustic Arrow, if you have the patience of a saint, can still boss with its little 2 million dot damage and whatever. Like there's still things that can do the content, but if we're talking about the introduction of these new bosses that have, that they're considered as hard as Uber Elder, and you've got all this aspirational content that is incredibly difficult. Like I put together a pretty good little build this league around, and I still I only got to wave 30 of Simulacrum a couple different times. Like there's like the content that's in the game, like you want all of the archetypes in some ways to be able to achieve that. Maybe it's using certain skills and whatnot, but like the proportional amount of investment bows take comparative to everything else in the game to achieve that level of damage is still off balance. And so while they have improved the amount of damage across the board for all of this different spell or skills, bow skills in general, and hopefully that means that people can click less damage nodes and click more defensive ones, it just doesn't really solve the bossing problem. And that's my biggest thing is I want to boss on a bow. Like I love bow bossing.
Oh, totally. Now, do you think though, I mean, yes, they upgraded bows and some bow skills as well, but they also buffed quivers, and like a two-handed sword doesn't get a shield to support it, but the bows do get the quiver.
It's kind of a nerf. So they made the +1 arrow like mod more universally available by putting it on the base, but they made it a suffix, which means that it competes with other really crucial bow modifiers.
Yeah.
So all of the damage over time things are considered suffixes. All of your crit multi is considered a suffix. Your attack speed is a suffix. And now you have a +1 bow. So all you're doing is basically competing for all these things that are really good at scaling you anyways. Whereas before, if you had an influence quiver, you could roll a +1 and then maybe get crit and crit multi on it, and that would be really good. So like it's more accessible and more uniform, and you're more than likely to roll a halfway decent quiver now. But like if we're talking really min-maxy, it still might not be the best.
See.
Now, some of the base types that are being introduced quiver-wise are like absolutely amazing for certain types of builds. Like there's the one where it's like Fizz taken as extra, or Fizz done as extra chaos, which is amazing for poison bows. Like that's so good.
Yeah. See, I have my little beef with it. I'm excited to see what it looks like, and hopefully it's the way that GGG thinks it's going to show up, and hopefully it's better than you think it is. And I mean, if not, I guess it'll get buffed up again the second league, like they've done with Absolution 3 leagues in a row. But I
No, I thought you were having a stroke.
okay, no, good, because
There's a
somebody's peeing with the door open, and I didn't want to talk. If you could hear that. Anyway,
Tell your wife to close the door.
that's right. That's who it is. Out of the 4 people in this family, that's who it is. No, so but I have a problem with quivers being, as a filter creator, I have a problem with quivers being accessories. To me, an accessory is something that everybody can wear, right? It's your amulet, rings, and belts. And so if you don't have, like that was saying before, that replacement implicit like you do for everything else, if you want to have a lot of implicits that do show up in a filter, it needs to be available to every character. It needs to make sense. To me, no matter how you argue about what a quiver would be like in real life, a quiver is only good for bow builds. And they have so many different implicits. Where's my piece of paper here? That was when I was doing my filter. There are 10 different 10 different implicits for a quiver that don't have a replacement. And those are going to show up in a general filter for everyone, even if they're not bow builds.
Well, you can just filter out quivers and never see them.
If you know how to edit that, sure. And I mean, if you use NeverSync stuff, but I'm just saying from a planning perspective, when you're the company, I don't see the reason that a quiver.
Well, I'd rather have 10 quivers than the way shields are handled, which have their primary stat type. So you have pure strength shields and pure evasion shields and then pure energy shields. And then there's the however many tiers of the hybridization between the two of them with armor energy shield or armor evasion shields or evasion energy shields, they have all of their tiers. And then respective within each of those are different levels of those. So like the amount of shields, for example, is like bonkers compared to how many quivers there are in the game. And shields are only good for shield characters. Like I don't use a shield on a bow character.
No,
Why
for
should I
sure.
have to see it?
For sure. But I mean, there's, I guess it turns into a much bigger conversation in terms of just how they generally do their base type itemization. It circles back
to the bases in general, how there's so many of them.
Yeah.
But what I like about the quivers is that they represent a variety of options that you can choose the one that fits your build respectively the best. So like if you're playing Caustic Arrow, you can't utilize crit, right? And then the Fizz's extra chaos means nothing to your chaos dot that you have going on from Caustic Arrow. But Pierce is really nice. You want to have at least one Pierce in a Caustic Arrow build, and it's not something you basically don't have to use a skill gem for it. You don't have to put points on the passive tree for it. You just have your Pierce right there, and that's awesome. So like it's really cool that you can pick one that's specialized to your build depending on like what it is and kind of augment the damage further.
Yeah. And Justin, you say totally.
When I read through the bow stuff in the patch notes, I was like, oh, thank God we got BK in this one. I'm not even reading this.
Yeah,
next.
Basically all the bow changes come down to is it's going to be a lot more accessible and you'll get further than you did, but there's still not enough for bossing. And it's fundamentally a game design problem more so than anything else, because the way the bow gems have been designed is that almost every single one of them are clear specialty, where you want to have chain and GMP and all this other kind of stuff. You want to have like clear specialization stuff. And it's really hard to take a skill that is basically inherently based around clear specialization and then add enough damage or ways to get damage to kill bosses without completely washing out the meta for clear. Because if you gave something like Ice Shot the ability to kill bosses by changing one link, everyone would fucking play Ice Shot because it would have crazy amounts of damage. And it would be better than anything else because that's what bow skills are. They're known for zoom and exploding screens of enemies. That's what they do best. So there's like this really hard sort of just game issue in general that you have to solve. It's like, okay, so we have these skills that are basically meant to be the best at this particular thing, but they can't do this other thing. So how do we solve that? And this is a good first step, right? We're like seeing how far can you push up bow damage to see what happens. But I think fundamentally it will take something like more single target focused tools to then kind of finally elevate bows into being, I guess, equal with other types of skills and their ability to boss and otherwise. You could drop another totally.
I feel like any question I ask related to bows right now is just going to come across as me being an idiot.
No, I don't mind explaining.
So I read the changes and I was like, okay, cool. Yeah. I see numbers going up, but I don't know enough about. I haven't played bow builds in I can't even remember how long. It's been super, super long since I played with bows.
I really want bows to be included in my slow-mo character that I do, a curse invested character.
I thought you were about to say the word filter and I was going to reach through this camera and strangle you.
But
it wouldn't be an episode if we didn't bring up filters.
Yeah, well, I think I've used up my quota to keep Justin at
way overused.
But they did buff a ton of skills. They cut down quite a few supports, but they buffed stuff like Fire Trap almost got doubled. But there's so many different skills got used. So I'm excited to see more. I don't know, Discharge kind of comes and goes. Like so many. So I'm not even going to bother shouting them out. But
no new ones.
No, and
it's a crazy league.
To me, big kudos to them for that. You know, they like took.
I would rather them not put out a shitty skill just to try and have an extra skill.
Yeah, the development hours that go into something like skill design are also like respectively huge comparative to what they could be used for creating the end game. So I think that's what more or less it came down to was tit for tat. It was better to spend the time doing that.
But it's nice to see.
Ooh, that rhymed. Well done.
But it's nice to see the company doing that, right? You know, putting out good content as opposed to lots of content, which, you know, they said they were going to start doing, and the community agreed and disagreed with, you know, how they were going about it. But it's nice, really nice to see this kind of stuff. And I big kudos to them for that. And what else did they do? Justin's a big fan of this one. Resist can't be lowered any more than 100% now on characters.
Okay, somebody please, for the love of God. No, I need an answer to this. Hopefully BK knows. What? I told Tyler when I was reading the patch notes, I hit a certain note where I realized that I just play the game differently than a lot of people, or maybe not. Maybe there's just a few people that play the game very different than the majority, where when I
that face.
Tyler just walked away in anger. Who knows why? He's going to die though. Anyway, so I read this particular part of the patch notes, which said that they were changing that the max you could reduce your resistances by was 100 or 100%. And I read it and I was just thinking to myself, like, who's the person? What is the person that is purposefully trying to reduce their resist? There must be something specific that I'm just not aware of.
There's a chess piece called Oriana's Prototype that does, I never used it either, so I'm probably not the best person for this. But basically, if the monsters reduced, the monster that you're fighting, like the things that you fight have elemental resistances that are the same to your most negative one. So like I think it was lightning specific too. So you'd have like minus 200 something lightning res by putting on items and stuff that would reduce the amount of res you have. But then anything you fought had that same resistance value. So that means like, you know how like when we talk about like pen, like elemental pen and stuff like that when fighting bosses, and how it's important because they have inherent resistances, like you're shredding all of that by a value of negative 240%. So if they have 40, now they have minus 200. And that is like you've basically fought something when you have like 10 cold res, and how much more it hurts than if you have capped cold res. It scales the same way too. So you're just doing like that much more damage because you've shredded that resistance all the way down into a negative. So what
was there not a trade-off of them almost dying to any lightning damage though?
Of course. Like if you could do certain things like max block and all this other kind of stuff. And I forget there was different mechanics that you would utilize so that you wouldn't take as much elemental damage or root it through different ways, like divine flesh or whatever else. But yeah, like the only thing that I think you were completely dead against was the Baron lightning damage over time squares. I think those are the only things that you couldn't do anything about because you can't like block damage over time and all this other kind of stuff. But then they had to cap it because it would, in conjunction with some of the uniques that they're introducing, would just be completely bonkers broken. So that's why that patch note is in there.
All right, well, there it is.
And they hopefully fixed fortification, or like getting fortify, right? How it ignores enemy physical damage mitigation now, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, it's a good first step for fixing it.
I think so. We'll have to see what it's like and how it goes, and the people that use it, what their feedback is. And two of my favorite non-changes are determination, like all the defense auras, with what was it, Defiance banner, and even I was nervous that mana reservation some of those percentages might have changed a little bit, and they didn't say anything about that. So some of my favorite non-changes there for sure. For sure. They changed around crafting recipes. I still hate how they unlock crafting recipes. Like you have to click them. You can miss crafting recipes in this game I hate that. Absolutely hate that. I wish it just showed up.
At least it's in a map. You could just read. Well, we've had this talk many times. There's obviously options they could
every time they don't do it, and they say, hey, yeah, we moved these, craft unlocks to the front of this boss gate or to this part of the campaign. I'm like, like the campaign stuff you can go back to because it tells you in the crafting bench where you can unlock it. But if you miss it in a map, that's a pain in the butt. Who knows how?
Just redo the map.
Redo the map.
Yeah, okay. I'll just bring that up. I'll guarantee that I have that map again.
I like that they moved some of the socket crafts to early in the campaign.
Yeah,
now.
they got rid of
It's
them
like
from
Act
Delve
4.
a while ago. Yeah.
Which is completely irrelevant because how annoying was it to be in like Act 7 through 10 wanting to just throw a couple sockets or a 3-link on something and then
couldn't do it till you're like well into maps. That doesn't make any sense.
Nope. The good change there.
BK, did you use Xana mods? Xana or Xana? How do you say?
I say Xana.
Xana. Did you ever use
that? Might
Xana's
just be
mods?
A southern drawl.
Because now they're Kirak. I always said
Kyrak.
Yeah, there you go. Southern Comfort. But you ever had Southern Comfort?
I do. That's what my dad drinks as his like daily drinker is SoCo and Coke.
And what'd you call it?
SoCo and Coke. Southern Comfort is SoCo.
I never ever did that math. Oh my goodness. Would you pay 13 chaos for ritual, or would you only do that if you've had enough Soko?
No, it's actually a good deal if you have the Atlas passive for it, because it's 13
Why?
chaos, and then if you have the one that guarantees 4, then it's a 2 point whatever chaos value per altar. And if you think about what you get out of those altars, especially if you juice it and can reroll it, you can pull 13 chaos back out of that pretty easily. Like some you won't and some you will. So it's definitely not like an immediate invest in return like some of the ones are. Like if you do like Essence or something like that. I don't think that's even on it, for example, but like Essence, you'd always get your money back that map, right? You put 3C in, you definitely get more out. So Ritual is one of those investment strategies that you see it over time because there's like highs and lows to what you can get out of it. Like when you pulled the Exiled out of there, you feel great. I got 2 Doctor cards out of a Ritual window on Ritual League when I was still in white maps. So like there's like a variance into the types of rewards you can get, but generally speaking, at a value of like 2.6 chaos or whatever it is per altar, like that's pretty good, right? Like I can't complain with that.
Oh, that's really cool.
Ty just sees the 13 chaos and
right,
goes,
but if you think if you pull out 2 scarabs and a really nice base, like you get a ritual base or something like that, or you get, you know, you pull out some stacked decks and one of those shows up with like the Enlightened Forgem or something, you know, like there's all these sort of variances to it, but over time it will always be beneficial as long as you have the Atlas passive for it.
Interesting. Now, I mean, that's considering you're in trade league. I would assume.
Yeah.
Well, unless, of course, you're lucking out with Exalts on a regular basis, which I doubt. But yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Cool. Awesome. Appreciate the explanation.
Mm-hmm.
User interface changes were really exciting for me. They added the, I guess, legacy tabs back to the map stash tab, which I think is great. So I'm glad that's back. But they have a separate tab for Conquerors and Guardians now, which is really cool for your influenced maps. I don't know if that includes horror maps or not. Maybe not. Probably not. But I think that's
you talk about being explicitly rated. I feel like I just keep hearing you say horror.
Am I slurring it?
Horror.
I like horror movies. They're my favorite. Horrors.
See, I gotta be careful of that because you don't like horror movies.
No, surely not.
Yeah, don't like those. And what else did they add that I thought was actually really neat? I didn't hear anybody ask, not like I have my ear to the ground and hear everything, but they added an option to visually hide your life and mana reservation so that you can only see your life and mana full. Like no matter how much you have reserved, your bar is only going to show what you have.
What happens if you
available.
have 100% reserved?
Then
what shows?
You're dead.
No, if you have 100% mana reserved, what shows?
Then it probably doesn't show anything.
Yeah, I don't think it would change. It's just be an empty globe. But I think this is for like petrified blood and stuff like that, so you can kind of like know what you're working with, I guess, and see it better.
It's cool.
Like, it's like a visual representation. I guess if you were playing like a low life build too, well, low life is now 50% and below, but like I guess old school stuff, if you reserve a lot, it's really hard to tell if you've taken any damage to it when it's just this teeny tiny little sliver at the bottom of an ES pool. So I could see some use cases for it.
I'd be worried that I didn't have one of my auras on or something though, because you wouldn't see the reserved amount showing. I usually look at that to determine how much versus how much I actually have available.
I'm excited to play with it and see if I like it. And they turned on advanced mods as a default. I love that Chris was kind of like making fun of the company for it, that advanced mods weren't on by default. They were off by default. So
yeah,
it's cool. But it is still crazy, like just because of how they order things and the ordering system that they have. When you hit Alt, the screen, it's actually quite hard to compare items when you're holding Alt. For me, I can't compare items while the advanced mod descriptions are on. Oh wait, no, I'm advanced. Wait, are advanced mod descriptions when you hold Alt?
Yeah, but they're on by default now.
Yeah. So yeah, see, that's
the biggest problem was that people would like start playing the game for the first time and it was off by default, and they'd see people hit a button and then magically have this crazy ass information. They'd be like, "Oh, how do I get that?"
Yeah.
And then like we would have to be like, "Oh, well, this is how you turn it on, and this is how you see it." And then now it's just on by default, so you don't have to have like the conversation
I know what you're
anymore.
saying though, Ty.
Yeah.
With some of the times where you're comparing them, because some of the descriptions are like 2 lines long, and so sometimes it bumps them down a bit. That's where I find it kind of weird sometimes when I'm, comparing to.
Yeah, when I'm comparing, less is more. Like I just need to see, okay, this has this much life and this much life. This has this resist and this resist. And then sometimes the advanced. But I love advanced mods on. I always play, what? Did I say
I don't
whore
think
again?
almost anyone would agree. No, easy, Tyler. God, no. I think it made me laugh, the idea that when I'm trying to compare two items, less is more. I don't think that that's really true.
Well, not
typically
like,
you want to see everything when you're comparing two items.
Okay, you're just
saying.
Okay. You know what? Hey, Die, your bug got fixed. While
Okay,
we're on
you
the
be careful.
subject,
See, now you're making it sound like you're just saying die to me.
Yeah, no. One of our listeners, we were talking about bugs that get deleted from bug report section for whatever security reasons they have, and we had a couple good conversations about that. So fixed to crash instances was in the bug reports. So I'm going to assume one of those was Die's crash bug that got deleted. Congratulations, Die. That's all I have to say about that. Changing the subject pretty quick from Justin's jerkness. And anyone else just excited in general that how did they say it? I always say it's Cyrus, but it's Cirrus. That's how they said it, right? In the video?
I say Cyrus.
I don't know. I say Cyrus.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're right. Cyrus is gone. You don't have to care about him at all anymore if you don't want to. How great is that? No? Nobody?
I'm fine with it.
Me?
Yep.
Okay.
His uniques are still pretty relevant, which is cool. That it's not something that falls into complete obscurity. Like Thread of Hope is still really good. And so is his hat for casters.
Ah, his hat. Wouldn't that be an awesome searchable tag, hey? Hat. That'd be sweet. Who cares about helmets? Hat. No hats. Where are my hats? But anyway, overall thoughts. What do you two think? Like great league, bad league?
I think it'll be good. Like, I'm really excited about all the different design choices that they've made in terms of the in-game and the progression through it, as well as like the availability and agency you have over pretty much every aspect of your experience, whether it's your day-to-day mapping and trying to generate certain rewards through mapping, all the way through like what boss you're going to fight when and how and you're going to go after, etc. And then certainly appreciate the kind of more linear scale to gearing. I think that's going to help a lot of people in general approach new power levels that maybe they hadn't before, because there was such a cliff between old rares and influenced rares and well-crafted influenced rares. So definitely cool in that regard. And I'll be interested to see how hand casting and bows end up. I think, like, generally speaking, it's cool to have damage like that across the board, but I feel like each one kind of missed the mark a little bit, where bows were damage, but also needed single target, and cast, like, the hand casting stuff is like damage, but also utility. Like, they kind of miss the but also part of each of those problems within those two archetypes. They solved one, but kind of left the other, Like, I don't think cast speed is enough to make certain stuff feel better, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
How about you, Just?
I'm always excited for new league.
Totally.
I'm pretty easy to please. I'm over the moon about the Atlas. I cannot wait to play the new Atlas. Just got to suffer through the first 10 acts again. But I think that Atlas is the most exciting part for me.
Yeah.
I build skills, man. For me personally, I figure that out as I go. I'm not super worried about it. I don't think about that very often, because that's not I don't spend my day, like Tyler will message me like last night, hey, I got some Path of Exile questions. And even my son, he'll be like, oh, I'm thinking about this and how does this work out? And Josh has been asking me. I don't do that. I just play and figure out the skill I want to play. So I'm not super worried about some of the changes in numbers. I'm really excited for the end game. Really, really excited for the end game.
Meet you there.
Easy to please, man.
Totally.
Nice. Meet you there. Yeah, right.
Yeah. No, you're not. You're not waiting for me.
Yeah. Hey, multiplayer's co-op looks like it's actually pretty good.
That would be pretty cool. Well, he did emphasize as long as you have the proper quest state,
Right.
co-op should
Which
be
is fine.
Yes.
That means kill Katava.
Hopefully.
Right? Now you don't have to worry about like how does your Conqueror progression work versus mine.
Right.
If we're doing it, they're literally, the Atlas progresses for us both exactly the same if we're playing together, and the Archnemesis is just if you build stuff up, we run yours. It doesn't matter who started the map. I think that's awesome. When I was listening to the Ziggy D and Chris when they were talking about that, I was just laughing because the solution to a lot of those problems was just don't play with dicks. Like. If you play with someone who's just going to run, if you play with someone who's just going to rush in and put their crappy thing in, don't play with them. Yeah. Problem solved.
Yep.
Bug fix. That's it. So I don't know. I'm excited for it. I'm not looking forward to editing this episode, but I'm very excited.
It was a bit of a mess. I'm sorry.
not a
No,
mess.
it's not a mess. It's just lost,
Oh.
which people are. I know everybody's gonna love because sometimes the last few, just because of getting towards the league, they were like 45, 50 minutes,
Really?
and a couple
Oh
people
man,
were
I
like,
don't think a
"They're
single
too
one
short."
of me has been shorter than an hour.
No, they're awesome.
No, nothing as we get close
Well,
to a
whenever
league
you
launch.
get bored, I'll come fill up another 30 minutes worth
Right
of
on,
bullshit
right
for
on.
you.
That's
Round it
right.
out.
All right, I think
No,
we're gonna
we're
wrap
not.
this one
We're
up
not.
though. Thanks. Oh,
Yeah.
Jesus.
There was a couple things I wanted to
What
say.
else?
Justin, I know you're excited to edit this, but
This is all coming
no,
out.
it's not.
Doesn't matter what you say.
Because the last thing here is, I think that
I'm gonna
this-
tack this onto
this
After
could
Dark.
have been better if there was a hot tub reveal. I think no matter what they released, this would be the best league end game expansion ever if this was done in the hot tub, like Chris was cleaning.
I 100% disagree.
I think
It was
would've been
the right
awesome.
call
I
not
don't-
to, but it definitely would have been hilarious for like the people that got it. Everyone else like tuning in to check this out for the first time would have been like, why the fuck is a bald man sitting in a hot tub?
And he's like yelling over the bubbles that he's refusing to turn off.
Exactly. Is that what
That's
you
all I
needed
wanted
to
to
add?
say.
Oh my God.
You gotta do your wrap up voice again. Sorry.
Is that actually
That was it. That's all I wanted to say.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap up episode 121. Thanks for joining us, BK.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
We will see everybody in episode 122. Patreons will catch you in episode After Dark.
Episode
121.
Do you have
See,
a brain
Tyler, you just
cell
screwed me right up.
left?
Well, would you like me to
Episode-
say something else so that you can start over?
No, you've
No.
ruined it. It's fine. This has been episode 121, Forever Exile, the Path of Exile podcast. I'm Justin, A.K. Tags.
Tyler Record of Days.
And I'm Brittleknee.
Thank you again for joining us. Patrons, we'll see you in After Dark. Everybody else will see you in 122. If you're looking for more information, you can find it down below. foreverexiled.com. We're on Twitter, foreverexiled82. We got a Discord. If you're not on it, you should be on it. Patreon and all the supporting things are down below. All of BK's info is down below. Bye.
Episode After Dark.
Yeah.
After Dark's going to
Hey,
be fun.
317's coming up.
I have booze. I'm gonna get
Hey.
shit faced.
Hey.
What'd you say, BK?
Nothing.
You'll hear it in the
I know I
episode.
will.
All right, bye.